Hello, this is Belinda. Today I am creating a layout with these 3 photos of my husband. Very funny, very in line with his personality. The photos are pretty grainy because I was using a not great phone camera, but that's okay, I don't mind. I've put them in black and white so the graininess doesn't really matter. I've got a nice white textured cardstock background and I have cut from some dark blue patterned paper this diamond cut file which comes from Cut to You. So I'm going to be popping that on the background. I may do some mixed media, I'm not quite sure yet. Then to fill in each of there's the back of that, the negative of that cut file, which I am also going to use. To fill in the little diamond spots, I've used my silhouette to cut them out from a whole bunch of different patterned papers. So I'll show you how I'm going to use those in the process. And to the supplies for this layout, I've dug back through and I've pulled out this bag that I had, which is all my old Gossamer Blue supplies. Don't we miss Gossamer Blue? I was only subscribed to them for a couple of months, so I don't have a lot of their products, but everything that I did have left I just chucked into one bag. And yeah, it's quite masculine color scheme, I think, so I will use it for this layout of my husband. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so I'm starting off by adhering those diamond pieces or the diamond cut file pieces down to my backing paper, which is the white cardstock. To make it a little bit easier, I've grabbed the negative from that cut file and I'm just taping it down to my white background paper because I did want this to be centered on the page. And when I sent it to cut with my Silhouette software, or when I set it up to cut with my Silhouette software, I did have it centered on that blue patterned paper, so I knew that I'd be able to use that as a template to stick those pieces back down. So I'm just going to run through with my art glitter glue with the fine liner tip and add just a little bit of glue to each of those little pieces of the diamond, and then use the negative of the cut file just as a guide onto where to put all of those down. It's really important if you are doing this to make sure that you do only have just a really small amount of glue on the pieces that you're gluing down, and you can also help by, once you've glued the piece down, by lifting the backing up, which I think you just saw me do, and that's just to make sure that the pieces that you glue down aren't getting stuck to the template, if that makes sense. Okay, so I've skipped ahead and there they are all glued down now, and I can go ahead and remove that template and I have got that really nice clean looking geometric diamond pattern on my white cardstock background. This is one of the textured cardstocks that Basil used to make. I don't know if you could see it properly during my little intro, but I have got a few pieces of these kind of textured white cardstocks still in my stash, and I do like to bring them out and use them, particularly when I'm doing slightly simpler layouts. It just adds another little bit of interest to the layout once it's finished. This one has got some an embossed stripe pattern across it. So you've just seen me trim down the edges of that white cardstock and trim the branding strip off the blue patterned paper, and as usual I am going to be matting my white cardstock background onto that dark blue patterned paper. And then later on in the video I will show you that I do run it through my sewing machine and put a line of stitching around the edge there. So just a little bit of tape just to hold it in place until I can stitch those edges down. Okay, so I didn't do this part on camera because it was a little bit boring and fidgety, but I pulled all of the diamonds off my cut file, the cutting mat, which you saw during the intro, and I've gone through and put them roughly into where I think they're going to go. So each little diamond is going to get an infill of patterned paper, and I've tried to make sure that I've spread out the colors and the patterns so that there's nothing that's too close together, and it's just a nice distribution of patterns and colors to lead the eye around the page. And then what I'm doing here is the diamonds, which you can see peeking out from the bottom and the top, and I think I think just the bottom and the tops of where my photos are going to go. I'm just popping those up very slightly on some really low profile foam dots. They only need the one foam dot behind them. It's not a huge amount of dimension, but it's just enough to give those a little bit of interest. I had initially thought that I would alternate popping some up and leaving some flat, but there weren't enough of the diamonds showing for that to really have the effect that I wanted it to do. So I decided to just do it this way. So the ones where the diamonds are fully visible at the top and the bottom of the photos, they're popped up, and then I am going to go back through off camera with my glue and just apply a little bit of wet glue and stick the remainder of those diamond inserts down flat on the page with just some wet glue. And I was just checking to make sure that I had them all stuck down. So now they are all stuck down. You can see the stitching on the edge there, and I'm going to hold it up just a little bit so you can maybe see just a tiny bit of the dimension that's been added with those foam dots. Now I'm ready to start working on building some layers with my photos. You might have noticed that I did go back and reprint I had one photo which I'd printed a little bit larger, and I had intended for that to be kind of like a feature photo, but it was just too big. It was going to cover up too much of the cut file design behind, so I went back and reprinted it at the same size as the other two, which I think is just slightly smaller than 3x4. And I have also matted them onto just some plain white cardstock as well. So I have this piece of, it's not quite it's a stripe, it's diagonal stripe pattern paper. It's a really soft, subtle print. And I'm going to mount all three photos onto this. And to make that photo pop out, I am adding some foam tape behind it just to give it a bit of dimension and really highlight that that's, I guess, the feature photo. It's the one photo where he looks like he's doing a semi-normal face. And just centering that there, and that one's going to be straight on. And then the other two photos I'm going to adhere down flat onto that backing piece, and they're going to be at a slight angle. I didn't want everything in this layout to be too linear, so by angling the photos just a little bit, it adds just enough interest without looking like it doesn't quite belong on the page. So I'm going to trim off the excess from the bottom, and then I will come back in with my scissors. I had initially planned on just leaving it as like a rectangular block, but then I decided I wanted that photo mount to more closely mirror the photos. So I'm going to come back in with my scissors and just trim down the edges. It's hard to put into words what it is that I'm doing, but you can see it pretty clearly here by watching the video. So just trimming it down so that the lines on that mat match the lines on the photos. Did have a little bit of trouble with cutting in those corners, and I think I go back and fix that up a little bit later. But while I am cutting those, the story of this layout, which is pretty much what my journaling was, my husband was off to get a haircut and I was having my hair done at the same time. When I knew he was finished, I asked him to send me a photo, or I asked him how his hair looked, and he sent me back this series of 3 photos, which is, it's so him. He's just got such a funny personality, and I really love how lighthearted he can be, because I definitely tend more towards the serious side. So it's good to have someone that really knows how to make me laugh in my life. So I've cut off an offcut of pattern paper that had been hacked into for a previous project, and you can see there I also used that to cut out some of the diamonds. So I'm just going to trim that down, and I've added a mat above and below that little photo strip there. And it is a little bit off center up the top, because on the left hand side of the photo strip up the top is where I knew that I wanted to put some embellishment, or put a little embellishment cluster. So I was okay with not having that top layer go all the way to the edge. So for the title, I'm using two different fonts, which were both in the little kit of Gossamer Blue goodies that I had. One is just a flat cardstock blue alphabet, and it's pretty similar in color to the background, the matte that I used. And the other is this yellow puffy alpha sticker. My title just says My Funny Guy. And I do come in and glue all of these down because they are slightly older products. I just was a bit concerned that they'd fly off in my album. So I did add some wet glue behind each of those alphas and then stuck them down again. And now I am ready to stick that photo mat, if I can get my glue running, stick that photo mat down to the background. And the reason I'm using some wet glue here is because some of those diamond inserts are a little bit dimensional, and I didn't want double-sided tape to be popping off, so I am using some wet glue to stick that down. And then I will pop a little bit of weight down on it and just wait for that to dry a little bit. So there we have it. And now I have my journaling, and I'm doing something a little bit different with this one. I've printed my journaling onto vellum strips, and the vellum strips are about 1/4 of an inch shorter than the length and width of that white background paper. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to adhere them going around the border of the page. I'm using this Dylusions glue stick because it doesn't show through the vellum, which is really, really handy. There's nothing worse than having some adhesive showing through. And I am only just putting a fairly light amount of glue down around that because I am going to come back around with my sewing machine and add just a thin line of stitching through those vellum journaling strips, just to adhere them down a little bit better and to add a little bit more interest. So you can see I've just run that first journaling strip across the top of my page, and now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add the next journaling strip down the side. And then I will rotate the page again and do the same thing. So it does mean that when you're looking at the page to read the journaling, you may have to turn your head upside down a little bit if you're not someone that can read upside down. But I just wanted to do something a little bit different, and with the way that the page was designed, I couldn't really find any other logical place to put this journaling, and I didn't want it to be hidden journaling for this page. So I just had this idea of running it around the outside, and I think it's a really nice effect, something different. I did measure before I typed up this journaling on my computer, I did measure to make sure that the strips that I was going to be adhering down weren't going to overlap each other at the corners. So they do fit really nicely in there. And yeah, like I said, I think that's a really nice, different way for me to add my journaling. Now, I didn't include the footage of me fussing around with getting these embellishment clusters in place, but what you can see is at the top left of the photo strip, I've got two tags that I've just cut the tops off them, and I've run some twine through the middle. I had a little die cut piece that said snapshots, and I added fishtail banner edges on both sides of that. I have a little cluster down in the bottom right. I wasn't sure about putting that there because I liked how symmetrical my page design was, but I think it balances it out. The cluster to the top left of the photo strip is balanced against the little cluster in the bottom right of the page, and I think otherwise there would have just been a little bit of too much empty white space in each of the corners. And then I do have another little cluster to the top right of the photos. So all of these bits and pieces came out of the Gossamer Blue little kit that I have. There's some chipboard, there's some puffy stickers, there's some die cuts. I think there's even a rubber piece in there. But I just picked out the things that I thought fit well with this layout, and that's what I'm sticking down. And then to finish off, I'm just doing a little bit of, as Laura Alberts calls it, scattering and splattering. I'm using the enamel dots that coordinate with these colours. There's some little cross signs. I grabbed a chipboard heart, and I think that's it. So I just add a whole bunch of that kind of, just the little finishing touches to each of my clusters where I think it looks best. And as you can see, it takes me a little while to figure out where I think it looks best to put it. And again, when I'm doing this, I'm trying to make sure that I'm balancing the placement of colors. So I'm trying to make sure that each cluster has got some of that muted orangey red, that it's got some of the dark navy, and that it's got some of the yellow, just to balance it all out. So once I'm finished putting all of these little bits down on the page, that will be it. The page will be finished. It's a nice, clean, simple layout, which is a contrast to the last process video that I shared. But I'm really happy with the way that this turned out, and I hope you like it too. As usual, there are some close-up photos coming at the end of this video. And also, as usual, I would like to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.